Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to NAUI's Dive Team Report. I'm your host, Greg Martin. You know, we've had a number of authors here on the program, and I was recently contacted about a new book that's out, and I find this fascinating. I'm assuming it's a new book, and we'll find out here in just a second. Those of us that dive a lot realize that we do spend a great deal of time underwater. And for those of us that dive in extreme conditions, that can put kind of I think in some ways, a toll on the body. This new book that's out is called A Year Underwater. It's Jerry Shine, who's a diver and author, is with us this morning. Jerry, welcome to the program.
Oh, thank you very much, Greg. It's great to be here.
So talk a little bit about the toll on the body of spending a year underwater. You didn't actually spend a year underwater.
Yeah, no, it was 12 months of diving. I wasn't actually underwater the whole time. But when you talk about the toll that it takes on your body, one thing that I did not include in the book was a dive I made where the water was 29 degrees.
Yikes.
And when I came out of the water, I forget what I bit into. I bit into something, an apple or something, and I lost 3 fillings. And I'm sure it's because the material of the fillings had just compressed so much in the cold of the water that they weren't really filling the old cavity, and so they just popped right out. And I thought, oh boy, the water's cold when you're losing cavities. Losing fillings.
Yeah, and you know that the water's cold when you get out and you drop your gear. And when you go to pick it up again, it's frozen to the ground.
Yes. Yeah, that's never a good sign.
Never a good sign. So what was the impetus here? Jumping into writing a book about spending a year underwater?
Well, the impetus was my particular love when I dive is marine life, and my particular interest is marine life that's right off the beach. I love going offshore. I love going to, the Bahamas and the Caribbean and farther afield than that. But I really love to dive right off of the East Coast, and I love to dive right from the beach and see what life is there. So when we're standing on the shore and when we're sitting on the beach and we're looking out over the water, what's happening at those moments? And so when you dive like this, you're constantly gearing up and gearing down in front of people who are just walking by and going about their lives. And suddenly they meet someone who's putting on scuba gear. And invariably the question they ask is, what did you see down there? What do you see down there?
Hear that one all the time, yeah.
All divers, we all get it if we're diving from the beach. And it's almost an impossible question to answer in such a short period of time as somebody has as they're walking by. And so finally, after hearing this question for 35 plus years, I decided I'm going to answer that question. And that's what the book is.
It's interesting that you start the book, your first chapter right off the bat is basically, what I did this year as well, is to come traipsing out of the water on New Year's Day. And we talk about, getting frozen. 38-degree water temperature for me. I think you said, 40 or 42 degrees. And the people that happen to be out and about on their morning, constitutional, that's the question. What are you doing?
Yes. Yeah. People generally think that you're crazy. And in truth, I can understand the question I can understand the feeling because, we all jump into water that's cold to go swimming, even during the summertime. And it's bracing, it's freezing. Nobody wants to spend a lot of time in it. But when you're in a dry suit or in warmer water, when you're in a wetsuit, you really don't feel it so much. And it's really only, as you said, when you come out of the water and you're on the beach and now you're starting to take gear off, that's when I really feel it the most.
I think the moment you're talking about, that crazy moment when it hits me, is I think it's in the beginning when I'm actually gearing up and I'm stripping down to be able to put on my dry suit undergarments.
Right.
And I'm standing in 24, 25 degrees snow, whatever it happens to be, and I'm in my skivvies, People are standing there watching you going, what? What are you
Yeah.
doing?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Generally, my what I try to do is what I worry about are my fingers. I don't want my fingers to be cold before I even get into the water.
Right, right,
So, if I'm in my underwear and my belly is getting cold or my legs, I can deal with that, but not my fingers.
right, right. Now you're talking about most of the diving that you like to do is it tends to be fairly shallow water diving.
Yeah, because it's right off the beach. So I don't believe that during this year that I made a single dive that was more than I think the deepest I was about 120 feet, and the vast majority of the dives were in the 40 to 50-foot range.
Those of us that dive in cold water tend to find out that most of the best marine life happens to be in that particular range. You get deeper
Yeah.
than that, and it starts to degrade fairly quickly.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of times when I do go deeper or I go farther offshore, swimming farther offshore, at some point it occurs to me, what am I doing? I sort of passed everything that I like, everything that I want to see, and I end up swimming back in to get back into it.
So you've got this book that's trying to answer questions about why that you do a year's worth of dives. What give me a story here. Give me a story out of the book.
Well, I think that my two favorite places to dive were the two geographic extremes, which was on the north, um, up in the St. Lawrence River, which is about 3 hours north of Quebec City. And in the south, it was all the way down to West Palm Beach. But when I was diving up in Quebec, we spent most of the time diving in the St. Lawrence itself. And at that point where we were, it's salt water. But we moved out of the St. Lawrence at some point to a river called the Saguenay. And the Saguenay is a fjord, so it has these steep rock walls that are just going straight up and down. And when you go in, the first 30 feet of it are fresh water. And it's heavily tannic from all of the plant life, the tree branches and whatnot, the vegetation that has fallen into it. And at about 30 feet, you move through the halleck line and everything sort of gets oily and greasy, sort of like you're swimming through salad dressing. And then you move into the saltwater parts of it. And at that point, it becomes pitch black. No sunlight whatsoever is filtering through. So on the day that I made this dive, we went in about noontime. It was a bright, sunny day. And at 30 feet, we were in the blackest black that I had ever seen. And yet the visibility was incredible. The water was crystal clear. At some point, my buddy was 40 or 50 feet ahead of me, and he was shining his lights. He had bright video lights. He was shining them well ahead of him, and I could see everything along the bottom, along the length of his lights. So I knew visibility was probably about 100 feet. And to me, just that experience of feeling so far away from the surface when the surface was really just a few feet away was pretty incredible.
That's one of those magic times that we as
It really
divers,
is.
yeah.
And as we were diving there, we're diving along these sheer walls, just sheer, and there are a lot of fish swimming along it, and all of the fish are swimming with their bellies to the wall, treating the wall as if it's the bottom. I just found that fascinating.
Wow, that is, and anybody who's experienced that that weird sort of area between saltwater, freshwater, where the two are in the process of mixing, they don't really mix very well.
No.
I mean, you hit that, and you're like, did I just did my brain just go like on the fritz? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a very
it is like swimming through salad dressing is the way that I generally describe it. Everything sort of gets an oily, greasy feel for 30 seconds or so, and then you're through.
yeah.
But at some point, we made a second dive in the Saguenay, and we made it at a slightly different place where it wasn't sheer rock walls. We were more following a sloping bottom. And I got down to about 90 feet, and the current really started to blast, and I started to see fresh water blowing by me. And I realized, wow, this current is really strong because it is pulling the fresh water from 30 feet and it's bringing it all the way down here to the bottom. That was when I knew that current was really running fast that day.
That's impressive. Talk a little bit about the gear. What's kind of your typical cold water gear setup?
Well, I wear a dry suit. I used to wear dry gloves, and then at some point I switched to wet mitts, and I honestly feel like my hands stay warmer. It feels like you just can't get enough insulation underneath a dry glove to really keep your hands warm when the water's, say, 32, 31, and when it's in that range. Although now I'm probably going to switch to some kind of electric, warming system, and I think that will make all the difference in the world. I have a fairly substantial camera, so I'm carrying a lot of gear, and I generally hook that into my the D rings on my BC straps, and more often than not, I'm going in with just a single tank, and that's my basic setup.
It's interesting to dive cold water, and I know a lot of the listeners that we have dive cold water, and I always find it fascinating to talk to people about what your setups are. I have cold hand syndrome, and it doesn't matter what kind of gloves that I use or any kind of system. The only thing I have not tried yet is, as you mentioned, the electrics yet. And, I need to get with our good friend Dick Long at DUI and say, hook me up, Dick, some blue heat or something along those lines and see how that goes. Right. So, A Year Underwater. The book is out. Where can people get a hold of this, Jerry?
The easiest place, rather than try to list stores where you can get it, it is online pretty much everywhere. You can get it on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles. You can get it on the iStore. Pretty much anywhere you can buy a book online, you'll be able to find it.
It's called A Year Underwater. It's Jerry Shine, and it's Shine, just like, his shining voice this morning and talking about, It's a fascinating read, some wonderful pictures in here. Our good friend Jonathan Bird has a quote on the front of the book. Pick it up, A Year Underwater, Jerry Shine. Jerry, thanks for joining us on the show today.
Thanks very much for having me, Greg.
All right, and if you would like to learn about the fascinating world underwater, be sure and check out your local NAUI dive shop or check out NAUI.org, NAUI.org. And if you like what you hear, give us an honest review on iTunes, Google Play, any of your favorite podcast outlets. That's this episode of NAUI's Dive Team Report. Thank you for listening. I'm Greg Martin. I'll see you underwater.